Have you ever thought to yourself, why the fuck do I keep doing this? Like, have you ever been in a toxic relationship with push pull dynamics and consciously you know it's not the kind of relationship you want? You know it's driving you crazy, but subconsciously you keep getting drawn back into it. Or have you ever been in a toxic job? Or maybe it's not even that toxic, it's just boring as shit. And you know in your heart and soul that you meant for more. And you also know that you're meant to make more money, but you stay there because it feels familiar and comfortable. Or, as a simple example, saying yes when you desperately want to say no. And the reason why you keep doing shit you don't want to do is because 6-year-old you is running your life on autopilot and making grown woman decisions. And no shame because we all do it. I didn't realize 6-year-old Angie had been running my life until I almost lost it. And I'm not talking about my mind, I'm talking about my life. If you don't know my backstory, the Cliff Notes version is my parents growing up were totally emotionally unavailable. And as an adult, I can understand what that means. I'm not saying I agree with it, I'm saying I can understand it. But as a child, I didn't have the tools or knowledge to be able to interpret the situation. So the way I interpreted the situation was that I developed a belief that I didn't deserve to be loved. And as you might be aware, your beliefs dictate your behaviors, and then your behaviors dictate what you attract into your life. So, needless to say, this caused a lot of suffering because I became a total people pleaser and perfectionist because I was constantly living for everything outside of myself. And this started in the school system and getting straight A's and being the perfect student, and within my family system of being everything that my parents wanted to be and suppressing my own desires and who I wanted to be. And then it evolved into also conforming to society's arbitrary bullshit rules, which, if you don't already know, I make my own rules for life because I think society's arbitrary rules are completely meaningless and pointless. But that's a whole other rant. And even in my 20s, I didn't realize that I was a people pleaser because now I fully admit that I'm a recovering people pleaser. But I was so blind to that fact for so long because it was just something that I did and it was so ingrained in my identity. But in my 20s, in my late 20s and early 30s, I was in a toxic relationship and I found out I was a people pleaser because I was blaming him for all of the problems. And because I was so dependent on his love and approval, because I just felt empty and alone without it, I didn't leave the relationship because I have also been in toxic relationships with that push pull dynamic because my inner 6-year-old was craving his love and approval, and I would take any breadcrumb that I could get. But anyway, I was blaming him for all of our problems. So, in researching his behavior and blaming him, I found out about codependency and people pleasing. And that was the very first time in my life that I was like, oh, I think I'm contributing to this. And so I started to become more aware of my own behaviors. So I was like, okay, I'm going to work on these and change my life. But what that ended up looking like was I spiritually bypassed most of my 30s because I thought I was doing the inner work, but I really wasn't. And then the biggest turning point came in 2017 because that boyfriend broke up with me for someone else, and then my dad passed away. So I was plummeted in profound grief. And if you have ever lost someone close to you, it makes you question your own mortality. So I really started thinking about my own life. And I had a good paying corporate job. I owned a condo. I was living in Chicago at the time. I owned my dream red convertible. So my LinkedIn profile looked great. My Instagram grid looked great. But I was so miserable inside because I had been living for everything outside of myself. So I decided to move to Hawaii, which was well intentioned in the sense that the decision came from I actually asked myself, what do I want to do with my life? Which was the first time I had really asked myself that because, again, I had been living for things outside of myself and doing things for other people. So it was well intentioned in the sense that I was doing it for myself. but it wasn't well intentioned, and that I was deciding to do this to feel better. I was still looking for something outside of myself to make me happy, but I was still miserable because that inner 6-year-old was desperately looking for something outside of me to validate my worth. So, long story short, because it's a huge dramatic story, and shameless plug, if you want the full story, I wrote a book about it. It's called Running in Slippers. But I got to a point in my life where I was so miserable that I didn't even want to be here. And I took a step to make sure that I wouldn't be here. But spoiler alert, I'm here. It didn't work. But that is what I call the beginning of my life because I started actually living for myself. I took away everybody else's opinion or whatever and started asking me, what do I want? Because I was so determined to not abandon myself anymore because that is absolutely what led to my rock bottom. And the shift that I made happened through I still did the spiritual work, but I did it in conjunction with the inner work, which involved rewriting my childhood stories and reprogramming my subconscious and nervous system to run on adult me beliefs, not the beliefs that were not true, that were in my head, that I had inherited from my parents. And when I say inherited, it's a blind inheritance because when we are little, we really don't even know any better. Because the problem is, as children and teenagers, we have no other choice than to live with our primary caretakers. And for most of us, that's our biological parents, but it's any adult that we spent the most time around. And those aren't always the most ideal environments. So, as children and even teenagers, we learn to survive so that we feel safe and don't go insane. So, I'm going to give you some very common examples of situations and survival strategies based on, and these are mostly based on my own experience and the clients that I work with. So, one is a parent who has explosive anger. So, for my own life, my mom was the one who had explosive anger. But when I talk to a lot of other women, it's usually their father, but it could be any parent or anyone else in the house, really. But if you have had this experience, you already know that any little thing can set them off. So you learn not to do those things, even if it's something you like laughing or telling jokes. So we learn to walk on eggshells and not be quote unquote too much. And by the way, if you're new here, there's no such thing as too much in my world. But we learn that as children that we're too much because our parents couldn't handle it, and it's like that old school game. It's not called Minecraft. Is it Minesweeper, where you're trying not to step on the explosive thing? But it's when that is your daily life, it's not a game and it totally racks your nervous system. So then you become afraid to even mess up because we're human beings and we make mistakes. Like the other day, I spilled a drink in my kitchen and I cleaned it up and it was fine. But when I was a child, I was terrified of making even little mistakes like that. Or another thing that's very common, and I see this in my clients, is hiding our feelings because our parents can't even handle their own emotions, which is why they have that explosive anger. So they definitely can't handle our feelings. So speaking up or even displaying our feelings becomes dangerous because that becomes a thing that can set them off. And another big consequence of this is that we blame ourselves for our parents' behavior because we feel like we have to tiptoe around and manage their emotions. We start believing that other people's emotions somehow become our responsibility. And another thing that becomes a survival strategy is I grew up with an extremely critical mother. And I've talked to so many people, even if their parents weren't extremely critical, because my mom was critical about my physical appearance, but I have had many clients, I even have friends who their parents just set the bar insanely high. So it creates this exact same survival strategy that I'm about to talk about. But it's about perfectionism. So we develop perfectionism traits because if we're perfect, then we can't be criticized. Or if we're perfect, then we can meet our parents' expectations. But the problem with this is perfectionism isn't about high standards, it's about impossible standards. So even when you think you're meeting the bar of your parent, they keep moving the goalposts. So it drives you insane because you're constantly driving for this impossible standard. Another survival strategy that is so common, especially in women, which is who I work with, people pleasing. Where are my recovering people pleasers? Because this usually stems from environments where our needs were, again, too much. So we start to develop a belief that if we're easy to love, then it'll be safe. So our entire identity becomes being agreeable, being easy, being low maintenance. And also, if you new here, I hate the term low maintenance. And I'm saying this from a place I used to consider myself low maintenance my entire life. No, we're not doing that anymore because being low maintenance means you're lowering your standards to meet other people's expectations. And we're not doing that anymore. But the last survival strategy that I want to talk about, because it's so common, is bracing for impact, which means if something good happens, you automatically start bracing for impact because as a child, you knew that that meant something bad was going to come and take away that feeling. So you believe that success is temporary and you're also bracing for disaster. And the reason why this one is important because, well, first of all, again, it's very, very common, but there's actually two reasons why I like to bring this one up. One is because I think all emotions live in our body, but this one does especially because this is where a lot of tight jaws come from. Or, like, I used to always have my shoulders up by my ears because your body is literally bracing for impact. So you're always like muscular tense as well as emotionally tense. And another reason why this one is popular for me to talk about is because you can't even enjoy your life when you're living this way because when something good happens, you don't even give yourself permission to enjoy it because you're always bracing for the next bad thing. So, the list of behavioral strategies can go on and on and on, but I'm highlighting those. I think that was three or four in particular because they are so, so, so common. So, if those are your behavior strategies, you are seen and heard because those are some of mine as well. But there also may be some that I didn't even mention just for the sake of keeping this video short. But my point of all of this is that because sometimes once we realize that we have these behavioral strategies as adults, there can be a lot of shame around it. Because again, it's like, why the hell do I keep doing this? But my point around bringing it up is that it's actually extremely intelligent of us to develop these strategies because as children, we're figuring out what keeps us emotionally and sometimes even physically safe. We're doing it for our own protection, and it's actually extremely intelligent of us. The problem with these behavior strategies is that after we turn 18, we're not dependent on our caretakers anymore, and we don't need these strategies. But they're so ingrained in our subconscious and nervous system that they run our lives on autopilot. But they're not functional strategies as adults because, well, there's several reasons for this. First of all, is that we are all born with a light inside of us. Like if you see kids playing on a playground, they're running around, they're screaming, their clothes don't match, their clothes are on backwards, their clothes are dirty, they will say anything, they will do anything. They do not give a F because they're just so in the essence of who they really are. But as these things start happening to us and we start developing these survival strategies, we become focused on surviving. And so, if that means dimming our light and dimming who we really are, which is huge with especially people pleasing and perfectionism, it's bringing us away from who we really are, which is a huge source of pain because we're disconnected from our own light. And then another reason why they're totally dysfunctional is because they actually push away the things that we want, like mostly love and money. I think those are the biggest sources of pain because For example, if you're terrified of being abandoned, so you over the top people please and become all needy and desperate about it, you're pushing the other person away and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And another thing I want to mention about people pleasing, because once I learned that I was doing that and I wanted to not do it anymore, it can be hard to change behaviors, but one thing that really gave me motivation to change was I saw an Instagram post about how people pleasing is actually manipulation, and not like in a scandalous way, but if you think about it, it is manipulation because you are acting in a way to get someone else to like you or get someone else to approve of you. So you're actually trying to manipulate the outcome. And once I read it as that, I was like, ew, I don't want to be a manipulator. So that really motivated me to really start changing my behaviors. So that was just a side rant, but I thought I would mention it in case it helps anyone else. But you may be wondering, or you may be noticing, like, okay, this is me, but what do I do about it? And the first step, the absolute first step, is taking accountability because turning 18 makes you legally responsible for your decisions that your nervous system learned when you were 6. And I used to struggle with this because it's like, yeah, but my parents did this to me and I don't want to deal with it. Life is not fair, and I don't know what to tell you about that because even if, like, say I get mugged on the street later today, and someone steals my purse, yeah, that sucks and it's not fair. And I still have to deal with the repercussions. I still have to cancel my credit cards and get new ones. I still have to get a new ID. I still have to do all the stuff that I don't want to do to get my life back in order. And it's the same concept. Like, yes, maybe our parents did something to us, but we still have the responsibility to live life a different way. Otherwise, we're just carrying on their tradition of, as some people say, the generational curse or the generational trauma. But the problem with turning 18 and not being responsible for these behaviors anymore, nobody ever taught adult us how to take the wheel. So a lot of us, including myself, I found myself in adulthood not even knowing who the hell I was. Because if you are a people pleaser or perfectionist, or even a lot of these other survival strategies, you are living for other people. And then you wake up in adulthood and you're like, I don't even know who I am. I don't know what I like. I've talked to women that either I've worked with or I've had discovery calls with, and I'm like, what lights you up? And they don't even know. Or I'll ask them if they don't remember. I'm like, well, what did you like to do when you were 6 years old? Because that's usually a clue, even if it's not something that lights you up now. And they're like, I don't even remember, because that's how disconnected from ourselves we can become. So, this is usually the phase in this awareness is where we search for insights. And just to be clear, awareness is the first step to change because, again, using my example, I wasn't even aware that I was a people pleaser probably until around the time that I was 30 years old. So, I spent my 20s totally running this program on autopilot, not even realizing that I was part of the problem. But once I became aware, even though it did feel very shameful at the time because I was like, "Oh my God, I'm part of the problem." So I did feel a lot of shame, and if you do feel shame, it's okay because you're a human being, but it's not your fault. And number one, change is possible. And number two, awareness is the first step to change. So that's actually a huge win if you have developed that self awareness. But the point that I really want to make is most people stop with the self awareness or they stop with the insight because they're like, oh, that's why I do that. And that is helpful because it feels like a relief because it's sometimes you feel like you've been struggling your whole life and you're like, why do I keep doing this? And it feels so frustrating. So when you have that dopamine hit with the insight, it feels like a relief. And that's good. Enjoy the moment. But awareness isn't enough and it's only half the battle. And I talked about this in a recent video, but insight addiction is totally a thing. And I know because I did it, and almost all of the women who come to me are stuck in this insight addiction cycle. And I'm talking journaling, manifesting, books, healers, crystals, all of it. But nothing changes because they're not doing the inner work. So you can know exactly why you people please and still spend the next 20 years doing it. Because even once I had the awareness of people pleasing, it took 5 to 8 more years before I really started making significant change. But that's on me. That's because I was spiritual bypassing. I wasn't doing the inner work. But my point is, like, for instance, I'll use another example from my life because my mom criticized me. Knowing that she criticized me and that wasn't okay of her, that is not healing. What really healed me was choosing to change my behaviors, choosing to speak up and be visible, even though sometimes it feels uncomfortable at first because I have to be seen and people may criticize me, but I show up and do it anyway. Starting this YouTube video or this YouTube channel was a huge part of my healing because it's like, here I am. People are going to make fun of me and criticize me, and they do, but I show up anyway because I'm not speaking to them. I'm speaking to the people who resonate with this message because I know I can help other people, and that is healing. So my point is a lot of healing modalities like spiritual bypassing, they're focused on feeling good in the moment. But you can't logic your way into healing. Logically understanding why you do what you do is not healing. And you definitely cannot woo woo your way into healing. And just to be clear, I love woo woo shit. But where this can start going sideways is when you give your power away to something outside of you to heal, you're not taking accountability. And that's why I was saying earlier, taking accountability is the first step because you have agency over your own life and you are accountable for living life a different way. And I love woo shit. Look, I have crystals. I love crystals, but I don't give my power away to these things to change me. I do the inner work and I do the woo woo shit in conjunction with the inner work. And just to go off on a side rant because I feel so passionately about this, this is also why I have an issue with most religions because people are giving their agency away to the religion. And the only religion I really know personally is the Catholic Church because I grew up in the Catholic Church. But my mom would always pray about things, which there's nothing inherently wrong with prayer or the Catholic Church, but she would never take meaningful action in her life. She would just pray and hope that God would take care of it. And that was totally giving her power away to something outside of herself and giving her agency away. So it's just a helpless way to live. So that's why I'm saying taking accountability for your life is the first step to actually making changes in your life. And my overall point is until you take accountability, because the true inner work is rewriting the story that lives in your subconscious brain and your nervous system, because your body absolutely remembers. Until you take accountability for rewriting those stories, nothing will ever change. Because trust me, your nervous system does not give a shit about how many self-help books you've read or how many crystals you have. It cares about what feels safe. But the good news in all of this is that stories can be rewritten. I am living proof of this. I know many other people who are doing this work. My clients are living proof of this. Every behavior is simply a clue to your story. So, money stories or behaviors that spawn off of money stories include overworking, undercharging, impulse shopping, apologizing for your prices, being afraid to ask for the raise, waiting for the other shoe to drop. And all of these behaviors lead to a story that 99.99999% of the time is not based on the truth. The stories were inherited from our parents based off of our survival strategy. So this is exactly why so many people feel like they don't even know who they are anymore, because the stories that they're living off of, that their identity is based off of, that their behaviors are based off of, those stories aren't even based in the truth of who they are. They're based on somebody else's story. And that's why, even though you're checking off all of the boxes of society's arbitrary rules, this is how you can feel like you're living a life that doesn't even feel like yours. And Before we get to the action step, and if you're new here, all of my videos have at least one action step because this isn't just about information. Because again, insight addiction is a thing. I'm not here to just keep giving you more insights without action. It's about the second half of the equation, which is actually making changes in your life. But before we get to the action step, I just want to say that I am looking for 5 women, because if this resonates with you, I'm looking for 5 women who are ready to uplevel their lives by rewriting these childhood money stories. So if you're done collecting insights and ready to actually start living differently, I would love to invite you to see what we're building inside the Overflow Society, which is an exclusive circle of only 5 women, because I'm keeping it small on purpose, who are done chasing quick fixes and they're ready to do the deeper inner work, like anchoring you into the identity of the woman who effortlessly receives and circulates money, uses her voice, and knows her worth. And by the end of 12 weeks, your life feels better and your bank account confidence and the energy you bring into every room. And I'm intentionally keeping this group small because I want it to feel like a group of besties who are learning and growing together. And it's not open yet, but the link to join my email list is in the description. And if you join my email list, you will be the first to know when the doors open so you can apply. And another bonus is, even if the Overflow Society is not a fit for you, I am also getting ready to offer 30-minute money story audits. These are not coaching sessions, but it's a safe place to get to the bottom to at least one money story very quickly. And I can also give you at least one tactic to help start rewriting it. And as of right now, these are only available to my email list. So if you are not sure where to start on your money story, I am offering these 30-minute money story audits. If you join my email list, the link will be in the description. And I just want you to start imagining what your life would look like if you start making decisions from adult you as opposed to 6-year-old you. So, this could look like speaking up in the meeting freely without rehearsing or minimizing what you say because you don't want to be criticized, or getting a compliment without immediately going into self deprecating humor or explaining why you don't deserve it. Or this is another big one, saying no, or no, that doesn't work for me, without apologizing or even explaining yourself, because you never need to explain yourself or soften your opinion, because that is abandoning yourself. And the last possibility that I want to plant in your mind, because this is huge with the women who come to me, is trusting yourself more than you trust other people's opinions. Because when you trust yourself, I am telling you, your whole life will change. And that's what happens when adult you finally takes the wheel. So let's get into the action step. This is basically a framework to start rewriting your money stories. In my coaching, it's very specific to the person. So, for example, I had a client come to me recently with a money story that was based in when she was younger, her brother played hockey. She had an older brother who played hockey, and her parents would spend thousands of dollars on his hockey equipment. And she wanted to take dance classes, but it was kind of sporadic how her parents would send her to dance class because her brother was their first priority, and then she was their second priority. So she had a whole money story behind that. So I cannot jump through my screen and have a conversation with you about what your specific money story is. So just to be clear, this is very basic and cookie cutter, but it's an amazing first step. So, because again, awareness is the first step. So that is step one. All I'm asking you is to be aware. So notice your behaviors, meaning you know that you're regressing to childhood when you do something that doesn't feel good in your body. Like when you have that moment, like I mentioned in the beginning, why the F do I keep doing this? Or you're kicking yourself, or just have that gross feeling in your stomach, or maybe you have anxiety. Um, Actually, I'll give you an example of this. I had someone recently send me a text message, which I know tone can be weird over text, but it felt really condescending and honestly kind of bullying. And instead of getting curious with them about the tone, I just responded as if everything were fine. But afterwards, I just felt gross because I didn't speak up for myself. So I'm sure you can relate because even I've done a lot of work on myself and I still have these moments. So when you have this moment of awareness, simply be aware. And if you want to take it a step further, just ask yourself, how old do I feel right now? Because you will start noticing the feelings that you feel in the present moment, that they feel extremely similar to feelings that you probably felt when you were little. And when I say little, it's usually like 6 to 8 years old, but it can be when you were a teenager. So sit with it and just ask yourself, how old do I feel right now? And the first step is simply awareness. But if you want to take it to step two would be identify the story or start to identify the story based on the behavior. So you have the behavior. So, say you do something people pleasing. What is the story behind it? And it could be the superficial story, meaning I usually like to peel back the layers of the onion to get to the root story. But just ask yourself, why didn't I speak up? So it could be I didn't want to disappoint them. I didn't want to seem like too much. I didn't want them to reject me or judge me. So simply start seeing the stories behind it. And again, as extra credit, how did that story play out when you were younger? Because it probably relates to the feeling that you felt in step one. And if you want to take it even another step further, for step three, this is where you start changing your behavior. Ask yourself, what would adult me do? And just to be clear, I'm not talking about a perfect version of an adult. I'm talking about one of my former coaches, he used to call it being a functional adult, meaning as adults, we're still learning and growing. It doesn't mean you're perfect. It just means you're making decisions from adult you versus child or teenager you. So step three would be, what would adult me do based on the story of adult me? And then step four, and again, step three is more of the awareness of what would I do. And step four is actually acting on your adult decision because adult confidence is built by making adult decisions and not if you're waiting until you feel more confident or comfortable, that may never come because you build the confidence in being more comfortable through taking action. And yeah, it feels totally awkward at first. I am not going to sugarcoat that, but this is why I recommend starting off small. Don't start a new behavior in a high stakes environment. Like, for example, the first time I tried to set a boundary, I was 35 years old and I didn't even know what boundaries were until I was 35. The first person I tried to set a boundary with was my mom, and it did not go well. In hindsight, that was a horrible idea. But my point is, it will feel uncomfortable at first, and that's okay. The point is, start small. And also, I'm not going to get into it in this video, but feeling safe in your body while feeling your feelings is one of the most powerful tools you can have as an adult because you absolutely need to lean into that as you're practicing these things because it does feel uncomfortable and uncertain. So, and I will say, because again, I used to be the person who spiritually bypassed and did all the things because it's hard to do the inner work. Again, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It takes a lot of courage because the bravest thing I've ever done was not moving to Hawaii. It was not leaving corporate to start my own business. It wasn't even surviving an attempt to end my own life. It was finally thanking 6-year-old me for her survival strategies, but lovingly asking her to move out of the driver's seat because, little us, we deserve to rest, and adult us, we deserve to live. So you deserve to live. You deserve to have a life that you feel excited by and not bogged down by these old survival patterns. So I hope this helps, and I will see you in the next video.